Welcome to Miro's library. By the firelight, near the sea. Let's read the story of Santiago, an old fisherman who faced 84 days of failure, only to enter an epic fight against the giant Marlin. Tonight, Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. Chapter 1. Solitude, Patience, and the Spark of Hope. Santiago was an old fisherman. He lived in a small village, on the seashore. He braved the waters, in the Gulf Stream, in his small wooden skiff. 84 days had passed, completely, without him catching a single fish. In the first 40 days, a young boy was with him, named Marlin loved him very much, and was learning from him the fundamentals of fishing, and the secrets of the ocean. But the boy's parents considered the old man to be absolute bad luck, or what is known in the fisherman's language as salau. Marlin was forced, under pressure from his family, to leave Santiago. He moved to work on another boat, which managed to bring in profit and catch plentiful fish since its very first week. The sail of the skiff, furled around the mast, looked like a flag of permanent defeat. It was tattered, patched, and made of old flour sacks. The burning sun and the glare of the water had eaten at Santiago's neck, making its skin wrinkled and thick. The wrinkles on his face were deep and spoke of long years of silent struggle with the waves. His hands bore deep scars, caused by heavy fishing lines when hauling large fish from the depths. But those scars were not recent, rather they were very old as a dry desert. Everything about this old man seemed worn out and fleeting, except his eyes. His eyes were the exact color of the sea, full of hope and cheer, and never defeated. Despite the boy leaving him, loyalty and compassion continued to beat in Marlin's heart. He waited for the old man every day. Upon his return with an empty skiff, he helped him carry the lines, the gaff, the harpoon, and the furled sail. They walked together toward the small terrace cafe near the shore. They sat for a while, talking about fish, about ocean currents, and about old fishing memories. They also shared a great passion for the American game of baseball. Santiago adored the famous player Joe DiMaggio and followed him constantly through old newspapers. He saw him as a symbol of strength, endurance, and determination. Despite the physical pain that the player suffered from, Santiago's shack was extremely simple. Built from the leaves and trunks of palm trees, it contained nothing but a wooden bed, a table, a single chair, and a small place on the dirt floor for cooking. On the bare walls, the old man hung a colored picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and another picture of the Virgin of Cobra. These pictures were all that remained of him. From the memory of his deceased wife, there was no stored food in the shack. The old man pretended, every night in front of the boy, that he had a pot of rice and fish cooking, and the boy, who understood the old man's hardship, pretended to agree, then went to bring him food and hot coffee from the cafe. He loved him and made sure that the old man slept full and warm. The two sat talking deeply about the 85th day. Santiago held a firm belief that his luck was finally about to change. He decided to sail out in the early morning, 2 very far distances, into the deep ocean, far from the shore, where the big, real fish swim. On that night, the old man remembered his youth and the days he spent on a sailing ship. Off the coast of Africa, he did not dream of battles, nor of women, but he always dreamed of the golden lions, playing on the sandy beaches at sunset. These dreams gave him strength and inner peace. Santiago slept on a pillow made from old trousers, preparing himself for a new battle with the sea, armed with patience, experience, and a resolve that refuses to break. Chapter 2. The Open Sea, the Ocean's Secrets, and the Gathering Storm. Santiago set sail in the dark gray haze of early morning, before the sun could unfurl its golden sails across the water's surface. He pulled his wooden skiff quietly through the pitch-black darkness. The boy Marlin helped him prepare the gear. They carried the bait bags, the water container, and the coiled lines. Silence wrapped around the shore completely. Nothing could be heard except the soft, rustling hiss of gentle waves breaking against the sand. The old man bid farewell to the boy with warm words, filled with quiet confidence. The skiff glided onto the face of the water, smoothly. The old man began to row with a steady, rhythmic strength. His tired arms pulled the oars with ease and mastery. He moved further away, step by step, from the faint lights of the sleeping village. The old man loved the ocean deeply and truly. He did not look at it as an enemy or as a cruel adversary. Rather, he viewed it as a gentlewoman, called La Mar in the language of Spanish fishermen. A woman who grants great favors, or withhold them, out of love rather than malice. He listened to the deep blow of giant sea turtles, breathing in the darkness. He watched the flying fish, leaping out of the water, slanting toward the early light. He felt a deep spiritual bond, connecting him to all the creatures of this aquatic world. Every bird and every fish was to him a brother or a companion. On the long journey of life, Santiago continued, rowing toward the distant depths, where the warm currents meet and the great fish dwell. He set out his fishing lines with meticulous care and absolute precision. He left nothing to chance or randomness. He placed the bait, consisting of fresh sardines, onto the large hooks. He set the lines at different, carefully measured depths: 40 fathoms, 70 fathoms, 100 fathoms, and 125 fathoms. His extreme care in adjusting the depths made him far more precise than the other fishermen of the village. He said to himself that luck is a wonderful thing to have, but he preferred to be exact and thoroughly prepared so that when luck came, it would find him ready to receive it. The sun rose higher into the sky. Warmth began to seep into the old man's exhausted body. He saw a seabird circling in the air above the water's surface. Santiago knew through his long experience that the bird was hunting for food. He followed the bird with his skiff, watching the water's movement. Suddenly, a small albacore tuna leaped into the air. The old man succeeded in catching it with speed and skill. It was a beautiful fish, weighing a few pounds, which would make excellent food or fresh bait. He felt a slight sense of relief, but his eyes remained fixed on the lines hanging deep down in the dark abyss. At noon, while the skiff glided softly in the middle of the wide ocean, one of the hanging lines, at a depth of 100 fathoms, quivered lightly and strangely. It was not the tug of a small fish playing with the bait. Rather, it was a cautious, delicate nibble from a creature of immense size. It was tasting the sardine in the pitch-black underwater world. The old man held his breath and braced his feet against the floorboards of the skiff. He held the line very gently between his fingertips. He knew that the giant fish was hundreds of feet below, beneath the bottom of his boat. It began to pull the bait, slowly and deeply. The old man braced himself, waiting for the exact right moment to set the hook deep into its mouth, signaling the start of the epic battle. Chapter 3: The Hook, the Heavy Drag, and the Invisible Titan. Santiago felt the sudden, heavy weight deep down in the water. The line went taut, cutting through the calm surface like a thin metal wire. He did not strike immediately, but let the giant fish swallow the hook whole. Then, with all the strength left in his body, he leaned back and yanked the line hard 3 times. He set the hook deep into the creature's jaws, but the fish did not surface. It did not jump, nor did it panic. Instead, it began to pull the small wooden skiff steadily toward the northwest. The old man braced the heavy cord across his shoulders and back. He placed a thick cloth pad between the rough line and his skin to prevent the rope from cutting into his flesh. The sun began to sink slowly toward the horizon. The coast of Cuba faded away until it became a faint blue line in the distance. Santiago was alone, out on the vast, boundless ocean. The giant Marlin towed the boat as if it were a light leaf drifting in the wind. The old man held the line with both hands, feeling every vibration and every muscle twitch of the unseen titan. He wished, with all his heart, that the young boy Marlin were there with him. He said aloud, into the quiet air, "I wish I had the boy." He needed another pair of hands to help with the lines and to share the heavy burden of this endless struggle. Night fell, dark and cold, over the deep ocean waters. Stars began to appear, one by one, shining brightly in the clear sky. Santiago remained, standing and leaning against the wooden gunwale, holding the tension. His back ached with a dull, persistent pain. His hands were growing numb from the constant, unforgiving strain. Yet, he felt a profound, unexpected respect for his invisible opponent. The Marlin was moving, with steady, majestic composure, never tiring and never giving up. The old man thought that he had never seen or heard of a fish so strong, so calm, and so determined. He began to feel a deep bond of brotherhood, connecting him to the creature at the end of his line. During the long hours of the cold night, the old man stayed awake. He could not sleep, for if the fish made a sudden run, the line would slice through his unprotected fingers. He ate a piece of the raw tuna he had caught earlier to keep his strength up. The flesh was cold and fishy, but it provided vital energy for his tired body. He talked to himself and to the sea, breaking the eerie silence of the open ocean. He prayed simple prayers, asking for the strength to endure the ordeal and to bring the fish to the side of the skiff. When the first light of dawn began to break on the second day, the situation remained completely unchanged. The fish was still pulling the boat with tireless, unrelenting force. Santiago's left hand suddenly cramped up, locking his fingers into a tight, useless fist. He looked at his hand with frustration and muttered, "What kind of a hand is that?" He forced himself to eat more raw fish, using his right hand, waiting patiently for the cramp to ease. He knew that the battle was far from over, and that his mind and body would be tested to their absolute limits. Chapter 4. The Sight of the Titan, Pain and Perseverance. The morning of the second day arrived with a soft, pale light. Santiago's left hand remained tightly cramped, like a closed claw. He massaged it gently with his right hand, trying to bring life back into the frozen muscles. He soaked it in the cold salt water, hoping the ocean would cure his ailment. He said to his hand, with quiet patience, "Work now, please. You must work." He needed both hands, fully operational, for the moment the great fish would decide to jump or make a sudden, powerful run. Suddenly the line rose, sharply out of the water. The sea parted with a loud, bursting splash. A massive, breathtaking creature leaped high into the air, covered in bright purple, silver, and dark blue stripes. Its long beak was shaped like a sharp sword, and its body stretched longer than the skiff itself. Santiago gasped at the sheer size and beauty of the giant marlin. It was larger than any fish he had ever seen or even heard of in his long life. The fish hung in the air for a second, then crashed back into the water, sending a fountain of spray into the sky. The sudden surge pulled the heavy cord through Santiago's hands, burning his palms and cutting deep into his skin. Blood trickled down from his right palm, mixing with the salt water. The old man gritted his teeth against the sharp pain, refusing to let the line slip away. He leaned back, using the full weight of his torso to cushion the strain. He wiped the blood on his trousers and washed his hands in the sea. He knew that pain was nothing to a man who had faced the ocean for decades. He told himself that a man can be destroyed, but never truly defeated. As the afternoon wore on, the sun beat down relentlessly upon Santiago's bare head. The air was thick with heat, and the salt stung in his open wounds. He began to feel a deep exhaustion settling into his bones. His legs trembled under the continuous pressure. To keep his mind sharp and focused, he began to recall his youthful glory days. He remembered a famous arm wrestling match. In a tavern at Cienfuegos, against a powerful man known as the strongest on the docks. They had wrestled for a whole day and night, their elbows resting on a wooden table. In the end, Santiago had summoned his last reserve of strength and forced his opponent's hand down to the wood. That victory had earned him the title of El Campeón among the people. Remembering that triumph filled Santiago with renewed confidence and inner fire. He looked at the vast blue horizon and then down at the line, held tight in his bleeding hands. He knew that his opponent, deep below, was also tired, hungry, and suffering. He felt a deep, unspoken bond with the noble Marlin. He was determined to endure every ache and every wound until the very end, no matter how long the battle might last. Chapter 5. The War of Attrition and Dreams of Lions. Night fell for the second time over the vast and endless waters. Santiago was exhausted, his body aching in every joint and muscle. The heavy line resting across his back felt like an unbearable weight. His cuts were raw, and his left hand, though no longer completely cramped, was weak and stiff. Yet the old man remained steadfast, keeping a tight grip on the cord. He knew he had to preserve his strength, for he could not predict when the great fish would make its final, desperate move. To prevent himself from passing out due to sheer physical exhaustion, Santiago forced himself to eat. He picked up the flying fish he had caught earlier, gutted it carefully, and ate the raw flesh slowly. Every bite was a struggle, but he knew that food was fuel for his survival. He drank a small sip of water from his container, measuring every drop as if it were pure gold. He looked up at the stars above the rigid constellation of Orion. The bright guide of the North Star end felt a quiet comfort. He was alone, miles away from human civilization. But he felt surrounded by friends in the sky and in the sea. As the quiet hours of the late night drifted by, Santiago felt his eyelids growing heavy. He knew that sleeping was dangerous, for a sudden jerk of the line could pull him overboard or break the cord. However, he also knew that without a few minutes of rest, his mind would begin to wander into hallucination. He wrapped the line securely around his back, rested his hands against his knees, and allowed himself to fall into a light, cautious slumber. He slept like an old dog, ready to wake up at the slightest movement. In his brief sleep, Santiago did not dream of the giant Marlin, nor did he dream of his past struggles or his lost wife. Instead, his tired mind drifted back to his youth, to the warm, golden shores of Africa. He dreamed of the vast, sandy beaches, the smell of the ocean breeze, and the great golden lions coming down to play in the twilight. They frolicked like young kittens on the sand, full of grace, majesty, and effortless strength. Seeing them in his dream filled the old man's heart with a deep, serene joy, restoring his battered spirit and giving him fresh energy to face the coming day. Suddenly, the line tore through his hands with explosive force, burning his skin and jerking his head down against the wood. The giant Marlin had finally broken into a series of wild, violent jumps. Santiago woke up instantly, his hands bleeding again as the line whizzed out into the dark water. He threw his weight back, using his knees and body to create friction, fighting to keep every inch of line he could. The fish was jumping again and again, throwing water high into the night air. The climax of the battle had arrived, and the old man braced himself for the ultimate test of his life. Chapter 6. The Deadly Circles and the Final Strike. The third morning broke, with a bright, blazing sun rising above the horizon. The great Marlin had stopped jumping, but it began to swim in long, slow circles around the skiff. Santiago knew, from his many years on the sea, that this was the final stage of the battle. The fish was tired, its strength fading, and it was slowly being brought up from the dark depths. The old man stood up, leaning against the wooden side, his legs shaking violently from exhaustion and lack of rest. His hands were raw, bleeding, and caked with dried salt, but his mind remained sharp and focused. With every circle the fish made, Santiago gained a few yards of line. He pulled the thick cord, inch by inch, hand over hand, coiling it carefully on the floor of the boat. Each pull was an agonizing effort, sending sharp spikes of pain through his tired back and shoulders. Black spots danced before his eyes, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He felt faint, dizzy, and close to collapsing into the bottom of the boat. He wiped his face with his sleeve and muttered into the quiet air, "Pay attention, head, pay attention." He prayed for strength, begging his body not to give out when victory was finally within reach. On the third circle, the old man saw the giant fish just beneath the surface of the clear blue water. It was a magnificent sight. Its long, dark body shimmering with purple and silver, its tail cutting through the water like a massive scythe. It passed close to the skiff, longer than the boat itself, its large, golden eye looking directly at the old man. Santiago felt a surge of awe and respect for his noble brother. He prepared his harpoon, lifting the heavy wooden shaft with his trembling hands, making sure the line attached to it was clear and free of tangles. The fish circled closer and closer, coming right alongside the skiff. It was rolling on its side, exhausted and near death. Santiago dropped the main line, stepped firmly on it with his bare foot, and raised the harpoon high above his head with all the remaining strength in his body. He drove the iron point down with total commitment, driving it deep into the fish's side, right behind its giant pectoral fin. He felt the iron sink into the hard flesh, and he leaned all his body weight onto the shaft to push it in as far as it would go. The wounded Marlin came alive in a final explosive burst of agonizing energy. It leaped high out of the sea, tower above the old man and the small boat, spraying crimson blood and ocean water into the air. It hung in the light for a fleeting moment, showing all its immense power and beauty, before crashing back into the sea with a thunderous roar. The water turned dark red around the boat. Santiago sat down on the wooden seat, his heart pounding in his chest. Holding the harpoon line tightly, the giant marlin lay still on its back, floating silently on the surface, defeated at last, but forever majestic. Chapter 7. Tying the prize, the voyage home, and the first shadow. Santiago sat on the wooden thwack of his skiff, taking long, deep breaths to restore his vision. The fierce battle was over, but the enormous task of bringing the marlin back to land had just begun. The fish was far too large to be pulled onto the small wooden boat. The old man knew he had to lash it securely along the side, from its sharp sword all the way to its massive tail. He worked with slow, methodical precision, using his bleeding hands to pass the thick ropes through the marlin's jaws and around its powerful body. He bound the sword tight against the bow of the skiff, so its head would cut cleanly through the ocean currents. He set his small sail, catching the light trade wind blowing toward the southwest. The skiff began to move smoothly through the dark blue water, towing the magnificent fish alongside it. Santiago felt a deep sense of relief, accompanied by a quiet, reverent pride. He looked at the giant creature, floating next to him, its purple stripes shimmering faintly under the bright midday sun. He felt as though he were sailing with a giant brother at his side. He washed his hands in the cool salt water, letting the ocean soothe his open wounds, and ate small bits of raw fish to regain his strength. For an hour, the journey back was peaceful and calm. The wind pushed the skiff steadily toward home, and the old man allowed his mind to drift. He thought of what the fish would bring at the market, and how many people it would feed. Yet, he felt that those who would eat its meat were not truly worthy of such a noble, magnificent creature. He watched the clear water passing beneath the hull, feeling a serene connection with the vast expanse around him. He was tired beyond measure, but his heart was full of quiet triumph. However, the deep ocean holds no peace for long. The scent of dark crimson blood, trailing from the marlin's deep harpoon wound, was spreading rapidly through the underwater currents. Miles away in the dark abyssal depths, a large Mako shark caught the scent. It was a fast, relentless predator, built for speed and killing. It turned immediately, swimming toward the surface with terrifying speed. Following the invisible trail of blood left by the skiff, Santiago saw the dark triangular fin cutting through the surface of the water. Far behind the stern, his heart sank, but his jaw set in a firm, unyielding line. He knew what was coming, and he prepared his harpoon once again. He tied the rope tightly to the cleat on the bow and braced his feet against the wooden floorboards. He looked down at his noble fish, then out at the approaching predator. and whispered into the wind that a man can be destroyed, but he will never let himself be defeated. Chapter 8. The First Attack, the Mako and Lost Flesh. The large Mako shark came, like a dark bullet firing through the ocean depths. Its sleek, metallic blue body was built for sheer speed, and its giant tail cut through the water with terrifying force. Santiago watched it approach, seeing its massive jaws lined with double rows of razor-sharp teeth. The old man felt no fear, only a cold, burning determination to defend his fish. He held the wooden shaft of his harpoon with both hands, waiting until the predator's head broke the surface, right next to the marlin's tail. The shark struck the marlin, its jaws locking onto the thick flesh near the tail with devastating force. Santiago heard the sickening crunch of leather and meat tearing. At that exact moment, the old man gathered all his remaining strength, driving the heavy harpoon straight into the shark's brain. The iron point sank deep between its yellow eyes. The Mako shivered violently, its jaws opening and closing in a final spasm. It rolled onto its back, dead, and sank into the dark abyss, taking the harpoon and the heavy rope down with it. The sea was quiet once again, but the damage was done. The shark had ripped away 40 pounds of the marlin's finest meat from its stern section. Dark crimson blood was now pouring freely into the blue water, creating an even larger trail for other scavengers to follow. Santiago looked down at his noble fish, seeing the wide, raw wound where the white flesh was now exposed. He felt a deep, piercing pain in his own body, as if the shark had bitten into his own flesh. He whispered softly to the marlin, "I am sorry, my brother. I went out too far." The old man knew that more sharks would inevitably come. Without his harpoon, he had to improvise a new weapon to protect what remained of his prize. He unbound his sharp fishing knife from his tackle, box and lashed the handle securely to the butt of one of his wooden oars. He tested the weapon with his raw, bloodied hands, making sure the knots were tight and would not slip during a heavy blow. He sat back down on the wooden seat, adjusting the sail to catch the light wind, watching the horizon behind the stern with tireless, watchful eyes. An hour passed in heavy, tense silence as the skiff glided smoothly toward the northwest. Santiago kept his eyes fixed on the trailing bloodstain in the wake. He ate a few small bits of the marlin's meat, tasting its clean, rich flavor, and felt a profound sadness for having exposed such a majestic creature to the cruelty of the sea. Far off in the distance, he saw two dark fins breaking the surface together. Shovel-nosed scavengers were coming. The old man braced his feet, gripped the improvised spear, and prepared to defend his honor once more. Chapter 9. The Shovel-Nosed Pack and the Breaking Oar. The two shovel-nosed Galano sharks came together, swimming side by side like dark, silent vultures of the deep. They were ugly, wide-headed scavengers, driven purely by the overwhelming scent of fresh blood in the water. Santiago saw them approaching from the stern, their fins cutting jagged paths through the blue waves. He felt a cold, sharp anger rise within his chest. He stood up, bracing his tired legs against the wooden floorboards, gripping his oar with the knife bound tightly to its handle. The first shark turned and rammed its head under the marlin's flank, sinking its teeth deep into the silver meat. The skiff shuddered violently under the impact. Santiago raised his improvised spear and drove the blade down with all his body weight, sinking the knife straight into the shark's yellow eye. The beast thrashed in agony, rolling over and slipping down into the dark currents. But as it fell away, the second shark struck from the other side, tearing off massive chunks of flesh with a sickening wet crunch. The old man swung around, his heart pounding against his ribs, and plunged the knife blade into the second shark's snout. The creature twisted furiously, its rough, sandpaper skin scraping against the wooden blade of the oar. With a sudden, harsh snap, the steel knife blade broke off inside the shark's skull, leaving Santiago with nothing but a bare wooden oar in his bloodied hands. The wounded shark sank into the depths, leaving behind a wide, dark cloud of blood and a ruined carcass along the side of the skiff. Santiago sat down on the wooden thwart, his hands trembling and his chest heaving for air. Over half of his magnificent fish was gnat's flank ripped open, its white meat exposed to the vast, unforgiving sea. He looked at his bare wooden oar, then down at the marlin's cold golden eye, which seemed to reflect the quiet tragedy of their shared fate. He whispered into the rising wind, "They have beaten me now, but I am not defeated, my brother." He knew that the night would bring more predators. Drawn by the massive trail of blood spreading across the ocean, without a knife or a harpoon, he prepared his remaining defenses. He untied the heavy wooden tiller from the rudder, holding it like a heavy club in his right hand. He rested his sore shoulders against the gunwale, watching the dark waves behind the stern as the sun began to sink below the horizon, ready to fight with wooden sticks until the very last breath. Chapter 10: The Midnight Raid and the Return to Harbor. Night settled over the open sea, cold, dark, and merciless. Santiago navigated by the faint glow of the distant coastal lights, his body numb with exhaustion, cold sweat, and accumulated pain. The scent of blood remained heavy in the water, a beacon that no predator in the deep could ignore. Late into the night, the final pack of sharks arrived. They came not in ones or twos, but as a relentless swarm, dark shapes rising beneath the waves, striking the mutilated carcass of the marlin from every side. The old man stood up in the pitch-black darkness, gripping the heavy wooden tiller with both hands. He swung blindly into the water, striking the hard, rough heads of the sharks as they thrashed against the side of the skiff. He felt the heavy wood crack as it hit bone and hide, sending violent vibrations through his arms and shoulders. When the tiller finally splintered and broke in his grip, he grabbed the short wooden gaff, swinging and stabbing at the shadows until it too was ripped from his hands. He fought with pure, unyielding instinct, using fists, wooden scraps, and every ounce of life left in his aged body. Eventually, the water grew quiet. The sharks had finished their work, leaving nothing behind but the bare, gleaming skeleton of the great marlin, tied securely to the side of the boat. Santiago stood silent in the cool night wind, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his hands bleeding freely. He looked down at the white spine and the huge, dark head with its long sword, floating beside the skiff. The magnificent fish was gone, reduced to a ghost of bones, but the old man felt no bitterness toward it. He adjusted the sail, caught the quiet land breeze, and steered his small boat toward the faint lights of his village harbor. It was long before dawn when the skiff slid quietly onto the pebbled beach of the small cove. The village was asleep, dark and still. Santiago unstepped the mast, wrapping the worn canvas sail around it, and tied it securely with rope. He lifted the heavy wooden mast onto his shoulder and began the long, painful climb up the steep road toward his small shack. He walked slowly, stopping several times to rest, his body bent under the weight of the wood, looking like a man carrying his own cross up a hill. When he finally reached his door, he stepped inside, set the heavy mast against the wall, and fell face down onto his bed. He pulled the old newspaper blanket over his shoulders and slept instantly, his palms turned upward to show the deep raw cuts across his hands. High on the beach below, the great white skeleton of the marlin lay tied to the skiff, washed by the quiet tide. The long battle was over. The old man was safe in his home, and as he slept, his mind drifted far away across the sea once again of the lions on the golden beaches of Africa. And so, the story of the old man and the sea comes to a gentle close. It was a long journey through the heart of the Oceania Voyage, where Santiago faced the fierce tide of life with patience, quiet resilience, and unbroken strength. He traveled far beyond the horizon, fought with absolute devotion, and finally returned in peace to his shores to rest at last. Now that the battle is done, it is your time to rest. Close your eyes and let every tension of the day slowly melt away. Listen to the rhythmic, comforting crackle of a warm fire, and feel the steady, soothing rise and fall of the ocean waves drifting onto the soft sand. Let this harmony of warmth and peaceful water wrap around you. Take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink completely into pure relaxation. The day is over, the sea is calm, and quietness is all that remains. Sleep deeply, comfortably, and dream of gentle things, just like Santiago, dreaming of the golden lions upon the African shores. Good night, and sleep well.
Come here, my friend. It's all right.